They thought she was just a confused old woman who had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. They thought no one was watching. On a grey Wednesday afternoon in Savannah, Georgia, Deputy Sheriff Colt Harmon made the kind of mistake that only arrogant men make. The kind where they size up a person in 3 seconds and decide they already know everything there is to know. He saw a black woman in her 60s sitting behind the wheel of a silver Buick LaCrosse parked outside a private residential community called Magnolia Crest. He saw a woman who, in his estimation, didn't belong there. What he didn't see, what he refused to see, was the 4-star insignia on the lapel pin sitting inside the leather portfolio on her passenger seat. He didn't know that the woman he was about to humiliate in front of a gathering crowd of neighbors was Brigadier General Vivian Okafor Stroud, the most decorated logistics commander in the history of the United States Army's 3rd Transportation Corps, a woman who had coordinated supply operations across 3 combat theaters and who had once been offered, and declined, a position on the National Security Council. For 22 minutes, a small man with a badge tried to make a giant feel small. 22 minutes later, the world looked very different for Deputy Harmon. Brigadier General Vivian Okafor Stroud had not planned on being in Savannah that Wednesday. She had driven down from Fort Stewart the night before to help her daughter, Simone, move into the new house Simone and her husband had just purchased in Magnolia Crest, a gated community of pale yellow colonial homes with wide front porches and magnolia trees that lived up to the name. Simone's husband, a civil engineer named Dwayne Whitfield, had spent 6 months on the waiting list for this neighborhood. He had the credit score, the income, the references. He had everything they asked for, and he had gotten in. The house was his, the neighborhood was theirs, and on this particular, while Dwayne finished up work at his office, Simone was inside directing the moving crew. And the general had agreed to wait by the car to receive a furniture delivery truck they were expecting at 2 o'clock. The general was not in uniform. She was wearing a charcoal linen blazer over a cream blouse, reading glasses on the end of her nose, a cup of gas station coffee going cold in the cup holder beside her. She had a legal pad on her lap and was drafting notes for a congressional briefing she was scheduled to give the following Friday in Washington. She was 61 years old and had the bearing of a woman who had spent 4 decades commanding rooms without raising her voice. She had silver locks pulled back at the base of her neck. Her hands, folded over the legal pad, were steady and unhurried. She heard the cruiser before she saw it. The slow crunch of tires on the brick-paved entrance lane. The deliberate idle of an engine that wasn't in any rush because it didn't need to be. Deputy Colt Harmon was 34 years old, 6 feet 2 inches of practiced intimidation. He had been with the Chatham County Sheriff's Office for 9 years, long enough to develop habits and short enough to still believe they were instincts. He had never been the subject of a formal complaint. He had, however, been the subject of 3 informal ones, all involving the same gate at Magnolia Crest, all involving the same type of driver, all quietly resolved by his sergeant, who was the kind of man who preferred to smooth things over rather than document them. He pulled his cruiser alongside the silver Buick and stepped out without urgency. "Afternoon," he said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an opening move. The general looked up from her legal pad. She did not remove her reading glasses immediately, which seemed to bother him. "Afternoon, Deputy," she said. "You live here?" "My daughter does. I'm waiting on a delivery." Harmon looked at the car. He looked at the house. He looked at the general with the specific expression of a man who has already decided the answer to a question he hasn't finished asking yet. "I'm going to need you to show me some ID," he said. "We've had some soliciting in the area." The general set her legal pad on the dashboard. She removed her reading glasses and folded them slowly, the way a person does when they are deciding how much patience to extend. "I'm not soliciting," she said. "I'm sitting in a legally parked vehicle outside my daughter's home, waiting on a moving truck. That may be, ma'am, but I still need to see ID." There was that word, ma'am. The way he said it, it wasn't polite. It was a fence post. The general reached into her blazer pocket and produced her military ID. She held it out without comment. Harmon took it. He looked at it for a moment. Not the careful look of a man reading, but the brief look of a man deciding how much the card was going to inconvenience him. He handed it back. "This is a military ID," he said. "It is," she agreed. "I need a civilian ID. Driver's license." She held his gaze for a beat longer than he was comfortable with. Then she reached into the glove box and produced her Georgia driver's license. He took that too. He walked back to his cruiser. She watched him in the rearview mirror without turning her head. Her coffee had gone completely cold. She didn't touch it. What happened in the next 4 minutes was witnessed by 3 residents of Magnolia Crest. A retired schoolteacher named Helen Bassett, who was walking her corgi along the entrance path, stopped when she saw the cruiser. A man named Roger Chu, who had just pulled into his own driveway 2 houses down, sat in his car with his window down. And a teenager named Amara, the daughter of the family across the street, stood on her front porch pretending to look at her phone, but not looking at her phone at all. Harmon came back to the car. He leaned against the doorframe, in the way that men lean when they want to occupy more space than they're entitled to. Says here your address is Fort Stewart. That's correct. I'm stationed there. So you don't live in Savannah. My daughter lives in Savannah. In that house. She pointed toward 14 Oleander Court, where, at that very moment, 2 movers in green polo shirts were carrying a sectional sofa through the front door. How do I know that's your daughter's house? The general paused. She let the question sit there in the afternoon air for a moment. You could ask her, she said. She's standing right there. Simone Whitfield appeared in the doorway. She was 33, with her mother's same unhurried bearing, wearing paint-stained jeans and a college sweatshirt. And she had clearly noticed the cruiser from inside, because her expression carried the particular weariness of a woman who had hoped this wouldn't happen in her new neighborhood, and was not entirely surprised that it had. Is there a problem? Simone called out. Everything's fine, ma'am, Harmon called back, not breaking eye contact with the general. The ma'am was the same fence post it had been before. Deputy, the general said, her voice dropping half a register, not louder but denser, the way a good officer's voice goes when they are about to say something that will be said only once. I am going to ask you directly. Am I being detained? Harmon straightened up slightly. Something shifted in his face. Not quite uncertainty. Men like Harmon rarely reached all the way to uncertainty, but something adjacent to it. Not at this time, he said. Then I'd appreciate the return of my license so I can continue waiting for the delivery truck. He didn't move. He put one hand on the roof of the car, not aggressively, but possessively, the way someone plants a hand on a table to claim the space. You know, he said, dropping into the conversational register that some men use when they want to perform reasonableness. I'm just doing my job here. Residents in this community pay a lot for the security and the... I know what they pay for, the general said. My daughter and her husband pay the same HOA dues as every other resident. That house belongs to them. I am her guest, and you have been unable to articulate a single legal basis for this stop. Harmon's jaw tightened. I don't need to articulate, Deputy. Simone had walked down from the porch. She was standing on the sidewalk now, arms crossed, voice level. Her name is Brigadier General Vivienne Okafor-Stroud. She commanded logistics for the 3rd Transportation Corps at Fort Stewart. She has given 40 years of service to this country, and she is sitting in front of my home, that my husband and I own, legally, waiting for a furniture delivery. A beat. Is there anything else you need from her? Harmon looked at Simone. He looked at the general. He looked back at the license in his hand, the one that said Vivienne A. Okafor-Stroud, that listed her rank, that carried the weight of a career that outranked everyone in the Chatham County Sheriff's Office by a margin that wasn't even close. He handed the license back. Just doing a welfare check, he said. A welfare check, the general repeated, her voice perfectly flat. Yes, ma'am. She took the license. She put it back in the glove box. She picked up her reading glasses and put them back on her nose. She picked up her legal pad. Have a good afternoon, Deputy, she said. It should have ended there. It would have ended there, for a different kind of man. But Colt Harmon had spent 9 years at that gate, and had never once had someone make him feel the way this woman had just made him feel, which was small, which was wrong, which was caught, and he made the catastrophic decision that small men make when they feel those things, which is that they double down. He didn't leave. He pulled his cruiser forward about 20 feet and parked it parallel to the curb. He got out. He stood by the hood. He was not doing anything in particular. He was simply being present. He was watching. He was, in the language of men like him, keeping an eye on things. The moving truck arrived at 2:08 p.m. The 2 movers climbed out and began unloading. Harmon watched. He said nothing. He did nothing. He was simply there, in the way that a cruiser in front of your new home is simply there, sending a message with its presence that it does not need to spell out. The general got out of the car. She did not look at Harmon. She walked to the back of the moving truck and began directing the crew on what went where, with the same calm efficiency she brought to every logistics operation she had ever run. Harmon watched. He tilted his hat brim down against the afternoon sun. He crossed his arms. He had been there for 11 minutes when the second cruiser arrived. This one did not belong to the Chatham County Sheriff's Office. It was a dark blue government-issue sedan, no markings, and the man who got out of it was wearing a suit rather than a uniform. He was in his mid-40s with the kind of posture that comes from years of standing at attention in situations where your spine was the only thing communicating for you. He walked directly past Harmon without looking at him and went straight to the general. "General Okafor Stroud," he said. "Special Agent Terence Mobley, Army Criminal Investigation Division. We received a notification of a potential civil rights incident at this address." He paused. "Are you all right?" The general looked at him with the same unhurried composure she had maintained since Harmon first pulled up. "I'm fine, Agent Mobley. I appreciate the response time." "Your aide-de-camp flagged it, General. He saw the cruiser on the neighborhood camera feed when you sent him the delivery pin number. He followed protocol." Harmon, who had been standing 15 feet away, trying to look like he wasn't listening to every word, stopped not looking like he was listening to every word. He took a step forward. "This is a local law enforcement matter," he said. "I don't know who called CD, but I was conducting a routine. Deputy." Agent Mobley turned to face him for the first time. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "I need your badge number, your supervisor's name, and your body camera footage from the last 30 minutes. Harmon blinked. "My body cam. Do you have it activated?" A pause that lasted about 1 second too long. "It had a technical issue this morning," Harmon said. Mobley looked at him with the expression of a man who has heard that particular sentence before in other investigations about other body cameras and has never once believed it. "I'll need you to remain on scene," Mobley said. "Don't leave the area." Harmon's radio crackled. He answered it, stepping away, and his voice dropped low enough that the words weren't audible. But the shape of the conversation was clear. His shoulders went up, then came down, then went up again, and by the end he was rubbing the back of his neck with one hand the way men do when they have just been told something they were not prepared to hear. What he had been told was this: his sergeant had received a call, not from the CID. That call was coming but hadn't arrived yet. This call was from the office of the Chatham County Sheriff himself, who had received a call from the office of Major General Patricia Kinsley at the Pentagon, who was Brigadier General Okafor Stroud's commanding peer, who had been texted a photograph of the situation by Simone Whitfield approximately 7 minutes after it began. Major General Kinsley had not been subtle about how she expected the situation to resolve. The sergeant told Harmon to stand down. He told him to be professional. He told him, and this was the part that Harmon would replay in his head for weeks afterward, that he needed to go apologize to the general before he drove back to the station. Harmon stood by his cruiser for a long moment. The moving crew was carrying boxes into the house. Simone stood on the porch, arms still crossed, watching. Helen Bassett and her corgi had long since moved on, but not before she had taken out her phone and made a call of her own. Roger Chu had gone inside, but his window was still open. Amara across the street had stopped pretending to look at her phone and was simply looking. Harmon walked over to the general. She was standing by the moving truck with her legal pad, making notes on which boxes had been marked correctly and which hadn't, because even in the middle of a situation like this, her instinct was to keep the operation running smoothly. She looked up when he approached. "General," he said. The word came out stiffly, like a door that doesn't open all the way. I want to apologize for the way the stop was." "Deputy Harmon," she said, and her voice was not unkind, which was somehow worse for him than if it had been. "You do not need to apologize to me for your feelings. I can't change what you felt when you saw me in this car." She let that sit for a moment. "What you do need to think about is the choice you made with those feelings, and then the choice you made to stay." She glanced at the spot where his cruiser had been idling for the past 20 minutes. That second choice, that was the one that had consequences. Harmon opened his mouth. He closed it. There was nothing useful inside it. "Have a safe shift," the general said, and turned back to her legal pad. He drove away. The blue government sedan stayed. Agent Mobley spent another 40 minutes on scene, collecting statements from Simone, the movers, Helen Bassett, who had given her phone number to Simone before leaving, and from Roger Chu, who had, it turned out, recorded the last 14 minutes of the encounter on his phone from his driveway. Amara across the street had been recording from the beginning. The footage showed everything. It showed Harmon's hand on the roof of the car. It showed the 11 minutes he sat in his idling cruiser, watching. It showed the body camera on his chest, which, upon technical review, had been manually switched off at 1:47 p.m. 3 minutes before he pulled up alongside the silver Buick. The report filed by Agent Mobley went to 3 places: the Chatham County Sheriff's Office, the Army Inspector General's Office, and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, which had been monitoring Magnolia Crest complaints for 18 months. What came back from those 3 offices, in the weeks that followed, dismantled everything Deputy Harmon had spent 9 years building with the quiet protection of a sergeant who preferred to smooth things over. The sergeant, it turned out, had smoothed over 2 previous complaints at this same gate. Both had been filed by black residents of Magnolia Crest. Both had been attributed in the internal record to misunderstandings. When the DOJ reviewers pulled the incident reports, they found a pattern that was not a misunderstanding. It was a practice. The sheriff's office announced an internal review. Then the DOJ announced its own. Then a civil rights organization out of Atlanta filed a formal complaint with the state attorney general. Then Roger Chu sent his video to a local news station, and the station ran it, and by Thursday morning it had been shared 40,000 times. Harmon was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The sergeant who had filed the informal resolutions was reassigned. 3 other deputies who had been present during previous incidents at Magnolia Crest, incidents that had never made it into official reports, were identified and named in the DOJ complaint. The house at 14 Oleander Court, meanwhile, got its furniture delivered. The sectional fit perfectly in the living room. Simone hung curtains in the front windows, cream linen, the same color as her mother's blouse. Dwayne Whitfield, who heard the story in full when he came home from the office at 6 o'clock, stood in the kitchen with his hands on the counter for a long moment and didn't say anything. And then he said, "I'm glad your mother was here." Simone said, "Me too." The general stayed for dinner. She ate at the new table in the new dining room of her daughter's new house in the neighborhood, where her daughter had every right to be, and where she herself had every right to park her car, and she drank a glass of sweet tea and corrected the congressional briefing note she had been working on that afternoon. Because the work did not stop. It never stopped, and she had learned decades ago that the way to answer people who tried to make her feel small was not to argue with them, but to simply keep being exactly as large as she was. Before she drove back to Fort Stewart that evening, she stood on the front porch with Simone. The magnolia trees along the street were lit from below by the neighborhood's lampposts, and the air smelled like cut grass and something sweet and far away. "You didn't raise your voice once," Simone said. "Raising your voice gives the other person the narrative," the general said. "I prefer to keep the narrative." She kissed her daughter on the cheek. She got in the silver Buick. She drove out through the gate of Magnolia Crest, slowly, without hurrying, the way someone drives when they know they belong, and onto the long road back to the base. In the months that followed, the fallout was substantial. Deputy Harmon was terminated from the Chatham County Sheriff's Office, following the conclusion of the internal investigation, which found that his body camera deactivation had been deliberate, that his extended presence at the scene constituted targeted harassment, and that this was not his first such incident. His sergeant retired early, quietly, and with reduced benefits after the records review, uncovered the 2 suppressed complaints. The DOJ Civil Rights Division opened a pattern and practice investigation into the sheriff's office's handling of calls involving Magnolia Crest residents. 3 of the 4 families who had previously filed informal complaints retained legal counsel. Brigadier General Vivian Okafor-Stroud delivered her congressional briefing the following Friday. It went well. She was promoted to Major General 8 months later, the 2nd woman in the history of the 3rd Transportation Corps to hold that rank. She never mentioned the Magnolia Crest incident in public. She didn't need to. The video had already done the talking. There is something that Deputy Harmon never understood, even at the end. even when the badge was gone and the cruiser was someone else's, and his name was attached to a DOJ filing. Power does not announce itself. It doesn't need to. A woman sitting quietly in a silver car with a cold cup of coffee and a legal pad is not a woman without power. She might be a woman who has learned, over 60 years, that the ones who shout about their authority rarely have as much of it as the ones who don't. He had 22 minutes to do the right thing. He chose wrong twice, once when he stayed, and once when he turned off the camera. And the universe, patient as it always is, made a note of both. If this story made you feel something, do something with that feeling. Hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. Tell us, did Deputy Harmon get what he deserved, or was accountability still too slow to arrive? We read every comment. We'll see you in the next one.